Hi, I'm Catherine, and I'm from the Arizona Caregiver Coalition. We are celebrating Caregiver Appreciation Month, and today we have a very special guest with us. We have Barbara Kavanaugh from the Cancer Caregiver Arizona. And thank you so much for taking the time to
Thank you.
interview with us today.
Well,
So,
thank you very much.
yeah. So to start off, Barbara, you're a caregiver. So can you tell us about who you take care of?
Yes, I can. But what I want to add to our conversation is that this week is actually Arizona Cancer Caregivers Week by a proclamation from the governor. And this really evolved out of our relationship with the coalition. What we realized that it was important to really make it very up close and personal right here in Arizona. And so, at any rate, from the 11th to 18th, we try to raise awareness about the cancer caregiver. So this is a wonderful time for us to be talking about, who is she or he? And I'm only one of thousands and actually millions, but I became a caregiver, unbeknownst to me. When my husband, my now husband, who is a 31-year myeloma cancer survivor, which is nice to be able to say before we go into more detail, is was diagnosed with myeloma when we were both at the time working and living in Boston, Massachusetts. And we were about to get married. It was our second time around. And he had to go for an executive checkup because his company was transferring him from Boston to open a new office in Europe, in the Netherlands. And we were very fortunate that he had that executive checkup because what they found was something, quote, in his blood. Now, there's all different kinds of cancers, and I'm talking about one of the rare ones, multiple myeloma. And it's called multiple, as I discovered, because it is many different forms and types. But it's something that we knew nothing about. So yes, how did we feel, or how did I feel? He went for what seemed to be a routine checkup. We were getting married the next month and going to be in another country. And he said, we got together after his appointment because I was working and he was working. And he told me, he said, I have this blood disease. And it was interesting. They didn't refer to it as cancer. And so I think that our first reaction was, well, what is it and what do we do? And and I think that's a feeling that anybody who, when they hear the words, you have cancer, he has cancer, she has cancer, uh, your child has cancer, I think I went into a shock mode. As a social worker and having worked in hospitals, I knew about cancer, but 31 years ago, there wasn't as much known about some of the less well-known cancers, breast cancer, lung cancer, so on. And so I think your first reaction, and most people's, is you're just in a state of shock. And I think that most of us are totally unprepared to how it's going to change our life. And it does. When you hear those three little words, you really have entered into a whole nother world. And I think my response to that was, like many people, is I wanted to find out what to do, and I wanted to fix it. I wanted to see, okay, what can we do? And many years ago, there weren't as many resources around and not as much information. And so I think, for nowadays, there's often almost too much information. And so again, it began in 1991,
Mhm.
but over the years, we literally lived in different countries. So I had to really be very, very involved because he was
Mhm.
trying to continue his job and at the same time being on chemo and so on. So again, everybody's path might be slightly different, but I think that there are a couple of really important things that I learned myself and which inspired me to, start an
Mhm.
organization, was that a lot of other people hadn't been out in the healthcare field or working, in a kind of situation where they would know about resources and who to talk to, and how to determine which doctor, and the kinds of treatment available. So when we retired, after having been overseas for a number of years, I learned a lot that cancer is a word that strikes fear into the hearts of people
Mhm.
anywhere, and anybody can be a cancer patient, and any of us can become a cancer caregiver. Uh,
Mhm.
just a statistic: 3,400 people every month right here in Arizona are being diagnosed with cancer,
Yeah.
which means that for every one patient, there's at least one, if not a whole family or group of friends who are becoming caregivers too. So
Absolutely.
that's that's how we really got started when we came back here. He was being seen by a specialist, and again, some of the things that I learned is that you really need to see the right doctor, having
Mhm.
you know getting diagnosed early, getting the right oncologist, and also learning about the different treatments became something that I was learning. It was like a fast process, and what I can say is that now having organizations like ours, like yours, it certainly is making it, I won't say easier, but certainly better. And also, that kind of is why we celebrate caregivers. And I know,
Mhm.
whether they're cancer or others, is that it really becomes a part of your life that you really don't necessarily have the experience or the tools to handle it, because you may have family, I mean, so on. So maybe you want to kind of ask a few questions, but I think that kind of sets the scene for how complicated it all is.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing your story. I know caregivers can be anyone and caring for all types of people, and definitely cancer is a big one for that faces families in our country. And so I know you said that your husband was diagnosed 31 years ago and that your initial reactions were shock and fear. But can you tell us more about your journey as a caregiver? Trying to, coordinate all those doctor appointments and the care for your
Exactly.
husband, and then when did you realize that you were a caregiver?
I think that, again, I thought of myself as being his wife, his partner, and I didn't, because I think, again, it very much depends on the person you're caring for. And I think that was one of the things I learned. He's extremely independent. And I think, there are some kind of cultural differences in particularly people of our age. We were of the generation where I was rarer than a lot of women. I, was working and raised a family, and so I really, kind of was out in the world. But for a lot of families, there's, maybe a more traditional role. It's the husband or the man who is the primary breadwinner. So that's a factor, whether it's you're the one with cancer and you can't work, and then it becomes the responsibility of your partner, or you have to have somebody. And I think we didn't use the word caregiver. They used to talk at a caretaker. And I
Mhm.
always kind of shudder when I hear that, because we're not takers, we're givers. But aside from that, is that it's a role that can vary according to the relationships in the, the patient's life. And so what that was one of the first things I recognized is it wasn't necessarily the just the parent taking care of a child who was ill. It very often was a grandparent, or was a treatment facility. So kind of figuring out what your role is as a caregiver really varies on your circumstances. As I said, my husband, when he was diagnosed, we were overseas, and we knew that if the company knew, or if he wasn't able to maintain his work, that he would, we would be sent home. And that was really a very frightening, problem, for
Mhm.
us, what would we do about it? And so the important thing was that I needed to kind of be kind of taking care of setting up appointments. I would go with him. We made appointments very early in the day. And so those were some of the important things that we had to adjust, was that he needed to still be able to work, and I had to make sure that I took care of all the other details. And I think
Hmm.
that's sometimes the role we, have to take. In other cases, and I think that again, if you were talking with a man, or the the partner, if it's a male person, they deal with situations differently. I know it's a generalization, but for my husband, what it was is he was used to being in charge and
Hmm.
running his own life, and he was an executive with the company, and so I felt like his administrative assistant, but I didn't mind. But again, it's something that people have to work out for themselves. And I realized that caregivers also, and when we came back to the States and started Arizona Myeloma Network with the help of the Mayo, and TGen,
Hmm.
because they realized that a lot of other patients who had this rare disease really needed to have information and education about how to deal with the medical side of it, in terms of medications and keeping appointments and so on. And so I started with the first conference and became a 501(c)(3). I'm going to put a little PS in here. Don't start your own charity. It's a lot of work, but but anyway, but it's also very rewarding. But again, I had also, as a social worker, had background in teaching, and I had
Mm.
taught, so I was comfortable, and we brought together doctors and social workers and resources like yours. And I think the theme that is so important is collaboration, sharing, having other resources coming together. And not only that, building a network of your own caregiving team. And I think that's what I learned, and that's what we started talking to people about, so they wouldn't feel so alone and overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And I met young people who became the caregiver. When one of the conferences, we always had a workshop on the caregiver. uh,
Mhm.
a young boy stood up, and we asked people to talk about, ask questions, and he was 16, and he said, I'm not supposed to be driving yet, but I drive my mother to her doctor's
Mhm.
appointments. Am I a
Mhm.
caregiver? So very often the caregiver can be not necessarily a family member, it can be a friend, and it can
Mhm.
again be a professional resource. And as a caregiver, don't feel you have to do it all alone. And I think that was a lesson I had to learn, because I was used to just taking care of everything, and not asking other people for help. And so again, the lessons I learned were that there were things I was good at, like setting up appointments and advocating, which is probably one of the most important roles of a caregiver. But I also found that a lot of people, patients and families, they don't feel they have the right to ask questions, or
Mhm.
they feel like, well, he's the doctor or she's the doctor. What do I know? And so again, those were some of things I learned and was able to, share with other families. And soon I was going to other organizations, meaning Colon Cancer Alliance, pancreatic, prostate. And what I realized is that it really didn't matter as much which cancer, as that very often the people involved, meaning not only the patient, but the family or friends, they really didn't know how to help.
Mhm.
And my husband taught me a lot. He would just say to me, "You're over caring, back off." and I'm lucky because my husband's Irish and I'm Jewish, so I'm like, oh, vey, and he's like, let's go out, have a drink, and have fun. And I think that's another thing you have to learn is, what you need for yourself as a caregiver, and I know this is the area that for all caregivers, taking care of themselves. And I think that's why we started, a whole program for
Mhm.
cancer caregivers, because we found very often they were neglecting their own health.
Mhm.
They were also, you know, my husband has to remind me of my appointments because he has his on his phone. And, but I think again that trying to work out, the balance, and also realizing or knowing that you can ask other people to help you as well. And I may be getting off your track, so get me back there.
No,
Mhm.
no worries. I think that's really helpful for other people to hear those same challenges and concerns and how you overcame those and having that validation that it is okay to ask for help. And that's what, you're here for in your organization. That's what we are here for with Arizona Caregiver Coalition. We're here so that way we can
Right.
help
Yeah.
caregivers.
Yeah.
And now, on your caregiving journey, what were some of your biggest challenges? Did you have some days where you were really overwhelmed, and how did you cope with some of those days?
Well, you're right on target. I think that most of us who are in the caregiver role, even if we don't think of ourselves as being caregivers, um, it was that you wake up every morning and the first thing you do is you think about him or her,
Mhm.
whoever the patient is. And we've been through a number of other health issues, with my husband and also with me. And I think that there's always that little, kind of cloud that hangs over you, like Charlie Brown with a little cloud of thing. It's always there in your mind. And sometimes it can be very difficult to kind of enjoy the moment instead of, constantly thinking about what could be and what should be. And also being kind to yourself. And I think that's one of the reasons why we, have Cancer Caregiver Awareness Week, is that I think, as a caregiver, I always put him first and put the
Mhm.
patient first. And there are times when he will say to me, hey, why don't you, plan your own day, or you go out to lunch, don't worry about it. Or you can go visit your, grandchildren. He said, I can manage fine. And then I end up calling him every morning, make sure he's taking his pill. But I think trying to find that balance, and very often people aren't giving themselves the credit that they really deserve for what they do. I'm not the nursey type, and that was one of my concerns, because there are some cancers where you have to have injections or there are
Mhm.
wounds and so on. And so I know all the best doctors, nurses, home health care, you know, and that it's okay for you to take off and do something fun for yourself, that it's okay to think about yourself as well. And and also knowing, I mean, I think figuring out what each of your boundaries are, male, female. And I think for men, when they're taking care of, a woman patient, that very often they feel pretty helpless, because there's certain areas of care that they can't do, or they have to go off to work, and they often feel, guilty or something. I think guilt is one of the issues that caregivers feel, or families. They often think, why him? Why my dad? Why me? Why, you know? And and I think that, really giving yourself credit, this kind of thing of, reaching back and go, you're doing a good job. And that's why also we have a whole caregiver program. I'm going to kind of segue, is that we found more and more people were coming to our, conferences, and we're saying that, sometimes they couldn't make it to the conference
Mhm.
because they had someone at home who needed to be cared for. So they would come, or we would give them resources that they could use to help take care of the person. And I think that's important too, that there are resources out there like yours, and we have booklets, we have information on our website. But now we're developing, and this really was inspired by COVID, which as was devastating for
Mhm.
everyone, but especially for people with, chronic diseases or life-threatening diseases. You can only do so much in telehealth and so on. But also the isolation is very, very destructive. And you tend to be more isolated with certain diseases like cancer and
Mhm.
so on because of the immune. But also, I find a lot of people don't really feel comfortable being around people who have cancer. It's almost as though we're contagious. And or what I find, and Jack always says, "Please, we're going to a party. Don't tell them about cancer. Don't say anything, please." And invariably, because I wear my bracelet, and it
Mm,
says Cancer Caregivers AZ and AZ myeloma. Um, but I feel that that's part of my responsibility is if you know and have the resources that this is really what you need to do is help other people. And
yeah.
so at any rate, we do try, especially during the awareness week, to let people know, and that's why this is helpful. But also you find this with yourselves with whatever the health issue is, people can get very isolated and feel that they're trying have to do it all alone. And to build yourself a network of family, friends, coworkers who know and understand what you're going through, it's not only helpful for you, it can often be helpful for them because they may need this help someday. And as I say, there's unfortunately a lot of not only cancer, but a lot of health issues out there.
Mhm.
And we can't do it alone. So we've now, as you may have heard me talk about, but we're developing a virtual cancer caregivers education program. And I always emphasize education because we're
Mhm.
not a support group. We connect people to resources, but we feel that if we have a virtual program and it's really educational, it'll have lessons so that, the caregiver can, have this series of educational and resource programs. And
Mhm.
you can look at it at night after work or during the day. And it'll be yours to be able to have right at your side so that, a lot of people now, whether it's on their phone or on their laptop, they'll be able to access us and other resources, but they will be able to get the information. Here are some of the things to bring with you when you go see the doctor. Here are some of
Mhm.
the questions. um, Here's how you form your own caregiver network. So we hope to have our virtual, we call the VCEP, virtual cancer caregiver education program, available in the first quarter of next year. We going to be including some of the information I'm kind of sharing now. And but we also love the fact that we're bringing in other organizations who provide different services. We work with children's cancer organizations, all different, kind of ages, but also we hear a lot about outreach to the underserved. Well, that was
Mhm.
part of our mission statement from the day we started. And as a result, we worked on the Navajo Nation. We work with a number of different groups. And we just hope people will, call you if they have a question or a problem, but they can get in touch with us at our Cancer Caregivers AZ, .com. So again, I know you will share this, and please feel free, anybody who has a friend themselves who has cancer,
Mhm.
no matter where you are, we'll be able to get you information. And we wish everyone well. And this is not only, thank the caregiver week. It should be, as my husband said, it should be every day. So he bought me flowers, and I want to say flowers were candy. Take her or him out to dinner. And
Yeah.
if you're a friend, give them a call and say, why don't you come and, have dinner with us, and be kind to one another. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Barbara. And that education piece is incredibly important in
Yeah.
connecting people to resources because if we can provide as much information as possible, that we can help as much as possible. And that is really important. So that's an amazing work, especially moving to that virtual program where it's accessible
Yeah.
for everyone. That's going to be really huge for people. So everyone just keep an eye out for that, for Cancer Caregivers AZ, for their virtual program starting next year. That's really exciting. And so I guess we answered all of my questions. So before we finish, is there something
Yeah.
else that you would like to say to all caregivers who are watching and maybe don't see themselves or identify as a caregiver?
Well, I hope that there's somebody who will turn around and say to you, thank you for your service. I'm also very attached to the military. My husband's a retired veteran, but it's very important to think about a caregiver who you may know and reach out and say, hi. But not only that, and I say to all caregivers, no matter who you are, we're all the same. It doesn't matter race, religion. As I always say, cancer doesn't care. But what we do have to do a better job is reaching out to people who might not have as easy access to the things because of lack of transportation or language or difficulties. But we're there for you. You're not alone. And I really say God bless you all and have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And if you need anything, you can, call up our friends here at Family Caregiver Coalition, or you can get in touch with us. And we want to say to you, thank you for what you do, and be nice to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And thank you for this opportunity to talk to you and get to know your journey as a caregiver. And a special thanks for all the work you do at Cancer Caregivers Arizona. And thank you all for watching. And
Thank
we
you.
hope that you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving and holiday season. Thank you, caregivers.
Thank you.